I would now like to call on the Provost, Dr. John Hegarty, to address us. Thank you.
Well, Dr. McAleese, students, fellow colleagues, it is a great pleasure to see this inaugural event, as I think it is a special moment in the development of this university. The Dean of Students' role of honour. Now, the role of honour recognises the great achievements of our students outside of the classroom. And we, in this university in particular, place a lot of emphasis and a lot of value in education on the total development of our students. That is intellectual, of course, but also social and emotional. And we also place a lot of great value on the development of a student as a citizen. And citizenship means giving to a community as well as benefiting from that community. As a student, your community is the university. Of course, there's a wider community, and when you graduate, you move into that wider community. But as a student of the university, the community thrives if people, students and staff, make it thrive, and that means giving to that community. And this award, this role of honour, recognises that aspect of student life. And I think we should applaud, and we should absolutely rejoice in those of our students who excel in this regard and lead the way. Broader society needs this. Our society here in this university need it as well. And I'm always delighted to see what our students are doing. A lot of it never appears above the radar because it's non-confrontational and so on, but it is vitally important. And it is extremely reassuring that the next generation, or the future of society, will be in very good hands. So I think it is important that we recognize this broader aspect of student life, of student education. And the role of honour did not come out of the blue. It responds to three themes in our strategic plan, that is furthering education and development of our students, enhancing the overall student experience in the university, and that sense of engagement with community and with the broader community. And the stories of the group of people here tonight, the honorees, of the members of this role of honour, your stories speak to service and do reflect a wonderful sense of generosity that exists strongly, even if many people think that our country has lost some of that. I think you prove that it has not. So I'm delighted to see this. The inauguration of the Dean of Students' role of honour, as I said, is a very important event in the history and the development of this university, and I'm delighted that Dr. Martin McAleese, who is one of our most distinguished alumni, is present to speak to us on this auspicious occasion. He himself is a great exemplar of this spirit of community, creating community. He is the person, for example, responsible for Your Country, Your Call, which was to generating that sense of positivity in the citizenry of this country. So I'm delighted that he is here this evening, and he will speak in a moment. I'd like to thank especially the Dean of Students, Professor Jerry White, and his team for all the work done in getting us to today's ceremony. And finally, I would especially like to congratulate you, the students, for what you have done outside of the classroom and for contributing so much to the Trinity student experience. Congratulations. Congratulations. You're wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Provost. Before I introduce our next speaker, perhaps I might be allowed to say a few words about the new Roll of Honour scheme. Supporting and facilitating our students in the process of learning is at the core of this university's mission. And while doubtless many people think that learning takes place in the formal sense in the lecture theatre, the laboratory or the library, there is much informal learning that takes place outside of those contexts. Our new Roll of Honour scheme is designed primarily to acknowledge the learning that takes place outside the classroom. Thus, as students participate in the activities of college clubs, societies or publications, or in the activities of organisations in the wider community, they develop various skills: leadership skills, organisational skills, communication skills. One of the objectives of our scheme is to afford students the opportunity, through completion of the application form, to reflect on what and how they have learned through participation in extracurricular activity. A second objective of the scheme is to acknowledge the contribution that students make through their extracurricular activity to their fellow students, to the general college community, and to the wider society at large. In this way, the scheme delivers on the college's commitment in the strategic plan to promote, encourage and incentivise volunteering in the local, national and international community by members of Trinity staff and students, and to implement a certification system for students' civic engagement both within the college community and outside the college environment. In recent times, college has taken a number of other important steps in deepening our commitment to civic engagement. We continue to build links with the voluntary sector, and we now produce a regular listing of opportunities, matching individual students and staff with appropriate organisations. College's Civic Engagement Officer, in conjunction with the Trinity Volunteering Opportunities Forum, organises an annual volunteer fair, and last year almost 40 local, national and international community organisations showcased their volunteering opportunities on campus. We support students who wish to pursue the Goshka, the President's Award, or who wish to embark on European voluntary service placements abroad. And this summer, we will be supporting a number of students in implementing their own community ideas under the supervision and guidance of community partners. So, against that backdrop, I think it is very appropriate, and we are greatly honoured, that Dr. Martin McAleese should address us today on the occasion of the inauguration of this Roll of Honour. For as the Provost has mentioned, Dr. McAleese exemplifies in himself a very strong commitment to civic engagement. This is most notable, of course, in the work that he has done together with their President in building bridges between the two communities in Northern Ireland. In particular, he has promoted various initiatives encouraging the loyalist communities in Belfast to move away from a culture of paramilitarism towards a future of peace, prosperity and constructive community development. And as the Provost also mentioned, in the Republic, Dr. McAleese was responsible for the national competition Your Country, Your Call, that sought out transformational proposals from the general public that, when implemented, would help to secure prosperity and jobs for Ireland. We are therefore, as I've said already, greatly honoured that Dr. McAleese has agreed to speak to us on the inauguration of our Roll of Honour, and I now call on him to address the gathering.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all in good form. And so why wouldn't you be with a glass of wine or a glass of orange juice in your hands at 4:30 on a Thursday afternoon? But can I first of all at the outset say that I'm much more ordinary than that introduction might suggest. But nonetheless, my thanks to you, Professor White, for those kind comments, and indeed for the invitation that allows me to be here and to share with you in some small way the success that you're celebrating today. I've been asked to speak about volunteering, and I will do so in a very broad way and draw from my own life's experiences and my own observations over my own lifetime to date. I suppose at the end of the day, life is really all about relationships. We are born into relationships with family. There's not much we can do about that, although I think sometimes we do wish we could do something about that. But we're also born or drawn into relationships with people who subsequently become very close and lifelong friends. And for many of us, family and close friends constitutes a kind of a comfort zone that we can choose to stay in and live in quite contentedly, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But on the other hand, if we choose to move outside this comfort zone and get involved in other things with other people, we can make things happen, we can change things, and fundamentally we can change ourselves. Now, I'm not a natural volunteer. I have always found it hard to confront what for me for a long time was the demon of being involved in other things. I have found it much easier for most of my life to occupy the back row rather than the front row, and I've only got involved in volunteering in any serious way after Mary was elected president in 1997. Now, on the other hand, she has been involved in volunteering all her life, particularly from a very young age, and I suppose that does lend some truth to the fact that opposites attract. I suppose, looking back on the reasons for this, I feel, you know, the way that I felt for so long perhaps can be explained by my early life in Belfast. I grew up in that city in the 50s and the 60s. It was an entirely different place then to what it is now. My mother and father were country people who came to the city in the late 1940s after they got married. And he got a job, and they bought a house close enough to his work so that he could either walk to his work or cycle there. And for them, these were the only criteria. And I suppose in some ways that demonstrates what you could regard as their naivety of the sectarian geography of the city, because we ended up living right in the heart of loyalist East Belfast. Now, as a consequence of that, we grew up as a minority Catholic family with little or no contact with our neighbours. In fact, to this day, I would find it very hard to figure out in my own mind where the next Catholic family lived. So, in a sense, we were effectively loners in our own community, and life was very difficult. The atmosphere was one of fear, of intimidation, of sectarianism, much of it real, a lot of it imaginary, but nonetheless, all of it was corrosive. And living in that atmosphere had a hugely detrimental impact on confidence, self-confidence, and esteem. Fading into the background, covering the badge on the school blazer, not wearing the school tie except when in school, so as not to draw attention, anything not to be noticed. And this was the nature of everyday living for myself, my 3 brothers, and my 1 sister. In some ways, that describes my early psychological landscape. And during that time, I had one great resource, the greatest volunteering organisation on this island, the GAA. It was that organisation that provided me with a handrail that guided me through those difficult times and kept me connected with my identity, my Irishness, and my nationalism. And those volunteers who organised the training, the fixtures, the transport, cut the grass, washed the jerseys, will never know the impact they had on my life. And I would suspect that but for them, my life would have taken an entirely different trajectory. And my involvement over a lifetime with the GAA had another profound impact on my life. Most of my lifelong friends and friendships were forged during my playing days, particularly at college. We all have a small number of intimate friends, you know, the ones that you can count on the fingers of one hand, who stay with you and who journey with you through life. And participation, I think, in any of the college's clubs or societies yields the potential for making such lifelong friendships. I have seen this replicated in my children through participation in extracurricular activities during their college days. These activities add a different dimension to college experience and play a significant role in personal development. I think of the Irish Wheelchair Association, which celebrated its 50th anniversary this year. Started all those years ago by 8 young wheelchair users who attended the Paralympics. And when they returned to Ireland, They reflected just on how lucky they were, and indeed how unfortunate so many others were. In those days, there weren't even structures to get wheelchair users out of the house. It was thought that they shouldn't go anywhere. What contribution could they make anyway? Being physically disabled then meant being disabled and disconnected for your entire life. Those eight young people decided that they were going to change this, and they each put 10 shillings, which, you know, I'm sure none of you know what 10 shillings or remember the 10 shillings, but it was the equivalent to 50 pence or 50 cents into a pot, and they started an organisation with £4. That organisation is now a professional organisation with paid staff, but still very much depending at its core on volunteers for most of its work. It has changed forever the lives of wheelchair users and has become an effective lobby for their rights. And when you think about it, an amazing achievement for 8 young people with £4 who 50 years ago had no structure, no experience, but a vision and an absolute determination to realise the vision. Many of us fondly recall hosting the Special Olympics World Games in 2003. We remember it with pride, for we undertook the hosting of these games as a massive national, voluntary, collective endeavour, which we saw through to a level of perfection and success that changed forever the way we regarded and included not just special athletes, but all those with disability. We also remember how many of us moved out of a comfort zone for the first time and changed the way we interacted with members of the disabled community, both in terms of touch and in terms of talk. 40,000 volunteers, roughly, were involved, almost every home in the country, certainly every parish in the country. The Games generated an enormous amount of generosity and goodwill and had a phenomenal, stellar impact on the national spirit. So the GAA, the Wheelchair Association, and the Special Olympics are just 3 examples of the critical impact that volunteers have on Irish life. Volunteers are people who step up, turn up, and keep turning up. They take responsibility for building up and enriching community. They get involved in everything: choir groups, active retirement networks and groups, helping the homeless, St Vincent de Paul, hundreds more examples. There's one final example of volunteering at work which I should mention. That is the example of Northern Ireland, where volunteers stepped into the chasm between 2 estranged communities to build bridges of trust and connectivity against a tide of cynicism and violence, to plot a way forward, away from a zero-sum stalemate to a win-win situation for all. I do believe that history will show the role of these volunteers in securing the peace. We owe them a lot, because without them, I don't believe we would have achieved the Good Friday Agreement as soon as we achieved it, or in the form that we achieved it. Volunteers can help eventually to put a positive and coherent shape on needs, desires, ambitions, which would otherwise remain unarticulated and unachieved. The capacity of volunteers to leverage goodness and resources is incredible. I had the privilege to be involved in organising medical teams from Ireland for 2 visits to Honduras in the aftermath, as part of the humanitarian response in the aftermath of Hurricane Mitchell that devastated the country way back in 1999. And I was also very privileged to be involved in helping to set up a small dental clinic outside Nairobi at a small mission run by an SMA father. And in both cases, I was overwhelmed by the response of people who, when approached, gave so generously of their time, their skills and resources. You see, many are willing to volunteer and give something back, but don't get the opportunity to do so. They don't know who to phone, they don't know who to contact, they don't know how to go about doing it. And then the thought suddenly moves on to something else and the opportunity is lost. And I think the secret here is to provide the opportunity to volunteer and be surprised by the numbers who grasp that opportunity. And this was a feature of Your Country, Your Call, which the Provost and Professor White have alluded to, the recent countrywide innovation competition, where over 200 individuals, organisations and companies came together behind the competition to make it work. And they did so on a completely pro bono basis, which I think is a tremendous expression both of social responsibility and corporate social responsibility in these very difficult, tough and challenging economic times. But significantly too, all of these contributions were provided not for publicity, not for profile, not for acknowledgement, not even for thanks, but for two of what I regard as the most laudable reasons of all: love of country and the national interest. It has taught me that there's a great sense of what you could refer to as old-fashioned patriotism around, despite all the cynicism, the hurt, the resentment and the anger. And I think one of the keys to moving forwards is for us to find some way of harnessing the potential of that patriotism and put it to work. I don't know the answer, but there is an answer. And finally, what about the impact of volunteering on the volunteer? Volunteers are often regarded as people who give and give and give more. But reflection suggests, I think, the opposite and can reveal a lot about the self. Am I a leader or a follower? Can I take orders? Can I earn respect? Can I show respect? Is my service valued? Do I work easily with people? Can I take criticism? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? This kind of interrogation of self helps to round off an education, helps to round off a personality, makes a person more at ease with self, identifies hidden personal resources, but ultimately it creates a better person, first for self, then for community, and then ultimately for our country. I have been privileged to have travelled the length and breadth of this island during the almost 14 years now of Mary's presidency. I have met thousands, tens of thousands of people of all ages and of all descriptions who are engaged in voluntary activity, whether altruistic activity or as members of clubs, societies and community organisations. And without exception, they talk about the personal satisfaction, the fulfilment and the joy that voluntary activity brings right into the core of their lives. The contribution that volunteers bring to Irish life is really immeasurable. If we didn't have them, or if their contributions were switched off, what would happen? I think that the word recession wouldn't even begin to describe the loss. Irish life, in many ways, would experience an ice age. So, congratulations to all of you who have participated in this very important and worthy initiative, who will be presented with certificates today. I am really heartened to know that another generation of young people are committed to carrying on the proud tradition of volunteering that has always been such a vital and important part of Irish life. And my final word is, may the role of volunteering in your lives be like the role of education in your lives, lifelong and enriching. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. McAleese. Before closing, I would just like to thank a number of individuals in relation to today's ceremony. Firstly, I would like to thank both Dr. Martin McAleese and the Provost, Dr. Hegarty, for taking time from their busy schedules to address us this afternoon. I would also like to thank those members of the college community who helped to devise the terms of the new scheme, the Roll of Honour, and who later helped to put it into effect. I would like to thank Trinity TV for preparing the video that we saw earlier, and I would also like to thank the Alumni Office for their generous support for today's event. Finally, I would like to congratulate all of these students who were included on the Roll of Honour. Speaking personally, I found reading the various applications a very uplifting experience as I discovered the myriad ways in which our students serve the college and the wider community. And our hope is that as graduates and alumni, you will continue to engage in voluntary extracurricular activity after you leave college. In that context, I would hope that you would keep us informed of what you are doing and maintain your relationship with college, as our alumni are a very important part of the college community. Finally then, just to let you know about the certificates, you can continue to enjoy the refreshments that are available, and when you're ready, you can collect the certificates in the foyer to the dining room on your way out. For anyone who isn't here, you could perhaps get the word out that the certificates not collected today will be available for collection from the Careers Advisory Service next week. So thank you again for your attendance.